My name is Astrid Sherman. I am here from North Vancouver in Canada, but originally, as you can hear from my accent, I'm from South Africa. And in South Africa, I did dance with the ballet company professionally, but before that, I was actually a champion acrobatic dancer. So I do come at this topic, I've been in both worlds, so I'm not coming at this topic from just a ballet teacher's point of view. I've been in that world of intense stretching routines, and I come with a very balanced opinion of what is needed and how we should go about looking at stretching for ballet dancers. So, the conflict between dance traditions and science research. Is there middle ground? So right now in science, there's a lot of research starting to be done on flexibility and stretching. And for a long time, this area was a little neglected because it's so hard to actually measure the outcomes of stretches. They couldn't, the testings that you need to do for research studies are really difficult to reproduce the measures accurately. And so for a long time, people avoided doing these studies, but of late, we're getting more and more research happening in stretching and flexibility, which is wonderful because at the same time as that, we're getting this explosion on YouTube and on the internet that is really affecting our young dancers of these outrageous stretches. And every child is trying those stretches, and some of them are really, really not safe to do. So, do you have to be flexible to be a dancer, a professional dancer? And it's quite a loaded question. In my personal opinion, I've seen many, many beautiful professional dancers who are not that flexible. Their legs are not that high. They have more functional flexibility, but they have a beautiful artistry and quality which make them beautiful dancers to watch, and they've had magnificent success. I feel we're all getting a little bit bored of watching développés behind your ear, and the distortion of line is something that my eye is not enjoying anymore. The other thing that's happened, the Royal Ballet has a wonderful physiotherapist, Moira, and she's been tracking entry level into the Royal Ballet School and then into the company of hypermobile dancers, and actually seeing what the percentage of hypermobile dancers actually make it into the company, and B, to become a principal dancer. And it's quite fascinating that even though the percentage of hypermobile dancers is quite high entry level into the school, so young 13, 14-year-olds, sometimes younger, are often selected, so pre-selected for these schools. But by the time you're getting into joining the Royal Ballet Company itself and making soloist principal roles, there was hardly any hypermobile dancers left. Where are those dancers going? What's happening to them? Most of them are injuring out. Hypermobile dancers tend to take much longer to bounce back from an injury. Their soft tissue does not heal as quickly, and so they tend to have injuries that are more chronic. They get depressed because they can't get back into dance quickly enough, and so you tend to see these hypermobile dancers burn out quicker. The other thing that I found fascinating was I am actually part of the IADAMS, which is the International Association for Dance, Medicine and Science. And it's a wonderful worldwide group of people who love dance, from surgeons to physios to dance educators, dance teachers, anybody who has a love of dance, not necessarily ballet, some flamenco, yoga, modern dancers. And it's a wonderful group of people that get together every year and present latest research on anything relating to dance. And in the group, I'm in a group of dance educators, and also with some of the physios. There was a lot of talk on how injuries have changed in the last 5 years. So in the last 5 years, the physiotherapists are seeing that a lot of young dancers are coming into their offices presenting with very, very acute injuries, and acute injuries usually don't happen in that younger subset, and 85% of injuries from younger dancers are coming from stretching-related incidences, not actually happening while you're performing or dancing, but during overstretching, trying to do things from YouTube. So, there we have one little picture. And I mean, you just go on YouTube and see some of the videos, some of the pictures that are presented, and you will gulp. Here we have one very common stretch that I'm sure any of you dancers in here probably did this as a little girl. In the last 10 years, I'd say, there's a lot of research being done on labral tears in the hip, and us ballet dancers are so prone to this with our turnout, our excessive use of turnout, and they're finding that making little girls do this stretch is, especially if they don't have that natural range of motion, is really not very healthy and does lead to further hip problems later on when they in their teens. A far safer way of this stretch, so that you're encouraging the stretching of the soft tissue and not hitting the bone and the ligament capsule, is just to lie on your back and let gravity take its toll on those legs. Much safer. Okay, we're seeing this overstretched second everywhere we go. This one hit me. Is it a pretty line? Does a jeté need to be over 180 degrees? Does it add any attractiveness? So, functions of flexibility. Why do we need flexibility, and what does flexibility do for us? Flexibility does give us efficiency of movement. It does make us, as dancers, it does make us move easier. It can be aesthetically pleasing, and everybody has their own value of aestheticness and what you find pleasing. It can enhance technique, and by that, obviously, somebody who cannot developate to 90 degrees is not going to get the same marks in a ballet exam as somebody who can developate to 120 degrees. But do we need to have the leg behind our ear? It's a lovely unison of mind and body, so a lot of yoga practitioners. Muscle relaxation from stretching is a wonderful place. And it does give some relief of muscle soreness and cramps. So we do need flexibility, and we do need to use flexibility. And there is still that running thought that lack of flexibility can lead to compensation, and then this leads to injury. So that your very tight dancer, because they're tight, will often compensate body placement, and wrong body placement will lead to other issues happening. Types of stretching. Sorry, I didn't miss one. So when we look at types of stretching, there are various different types of stretching that we can use as dancers. And each type of stretch has a different advantage and a disadvantage. They all are there to give you greater range of motion, and range of motion is how far we can move our muscles around a joint. And as dancers, we need to be very mobile. But some types of stretches are actually dangerous. Some give you short-term gains, some are better giving you long-term gains. So a very tight dancer is going to want to look at the stretches that are going to give you long-term gains, whereas a very hypermobile dancer really doesn't need much more range of motion. They might just want to stretch to, if they've got a sore muscle, or they just want to ease their body. So they're not going to be looking at the same type of stretches. Dancers really, stretching has been shown to be so dangerous a well-educated dance teacher or a medical practitioner, if you need a stretching regime, should come from somebody with knowledge. It should not come from your peers, and it should not come from the internet. Ballistic stretching. So ballistic stretching is what we do when we do grand battement. So it has no end point. It's got a lot of swinging, it's got some bouncing. It's very dangerous if you're not warm. So, and we know this in ballet. That's why grand battement comes at the end of a bar. We don't start our class with a grand battement. The danger of ballistic stretching is that it's sometimes not so easy to control. So I bet everybody here in this room has pulled a hamstring or adductor at some point, and usually it's during a ballistic movement where you've kicked your leg too high for how warm your body is at that moment. So ballistic stretching is very hard to control, and that's why it's not advised as a stretching regime for a tighter child. Oh, sorry, I've gone ahead. The problem is that in ballistic stretching is as that muscle is stretched, there's stretch receptors in your muscle, and the speed of your grand battement actually causes those receptors to fire very fast, and they will cause a contraction to happen in the same muscle, and it's almost injury preventative measure, which is good in some circumstances, being on your point, rolling off. We want that to happen, but in a grand battement, it's not a great scenario. So that's where a lot of dancers get injured and pull hamstrings, adductors. The advantage of ballistic stretching is that that's how we dance. A lot of dance movement is ballistic movement. So we can't not teach it. We have to just make sure we teach it safely. And that's why in ballet there's all about your body being in placement, nothing too wild, core control. So the technical issues will help make this specific type of stretching safer. Dynamic stretching is similar to ballistic stretching, but it's more controlled. So dynamic stretch is when you do a développé. A lot of our ballet bar is more of a dynamic movement stretch. And it's a great way of stretching. So this is what the type of stretching that they are saying we should use to not to warm up, but we should use during our day. We should never be lying down and doing long stretches. Stretching should now be much more dynamic, moving through. Moving our range of motion anywhere we can is going to give us more mobility. So dynamic stretching involves multiple joints. It replicates movement patterns that we use in dance. It gives neuromuscular training. It helps improve your coordination. So it makes you a better dancer. It strengthens your muscles. Every time you practice a développé, you're getting stronger. It keeps your core body temperature warm. It will keep you warm so that you're ready for your best performance. So dynamic stretching is a wonderful one to know. However, for your very tight child, the dynamic stretching is not going to be enough. So dynamic stretching is what we suggest for a hypermobile child, but for a very tight child, it's not going to be enough to help them gain more flexibility. Dynamic stretching as well, also only after proper warm-up. And what is a warm-up? Because warm-up is not stretching. Warm-up is getting your heart rate going. Warm-up is feeling a light sweat on your body. Then your body is ready for dynamic stretching. Static stretching. This is where you take your muscle, you elongate it to its point of tolerance, and you're going to hold it there. We're not going to hold it there for much longer than 30 seconds. 30 seconds is the top end. And in fact, during a ballet class, you should never hold any stretch longer than 15 seconds. So 30 seconds should come at the end of the class, nothing more than 15 seconds during class, because what holding a muscle will do is that it turns off those very receptors in your muscles that will tell you where you are in space and place. So interestingly enough, I don't know if you know, in all the sports literature, all the soccer teams, the hockey teams, the athletes have stopped stretching before they exercise. Before, they all used to do calf muscle stretches, hamstring stretches, quad stretches, no more. Now your warm-up consists of just gradually, slowly getting your heart rate to go from 0 up to a comfortable pace. That's your warm-up. So static stretch for dancers, and us dancers are renowned for coming in, and what is our warm-up? We sit on the floor in second and think that we are warming up. So it's a big change for us as well as the sports people. Static stretches, though, are very important to help gain more flexibility for those tighter dancers. You just have to know that you need to do them when you're warm, and you need to do them at the end of your day. You can use gravity. You can use a wall. You can put your leg up on a wall. You can use a friend. You can use a TheraBand. Any stretch where you're holding a position is a static stretch. They do produce long-term gains, but it does need to be regular. So you can't do it once and expect that you're going to see any results. It does take time. It takes 6 weeks. Prolonged stretches are now the bad language of dance. These are those stretches that you're seeing on YouTube. These are the Russian oversplit stretches. The images of the dancer with their leg on the chair, 2 chairs, somebody holding each leg up. Any of those stretches, there's those TheraBands, those things that the dancers put on, and they lie back forever. Hypermobile kids really don't need them. Professionals will use it in very serious medical cases. They can be used, these prolonged stretches, but that's under supervision, and it's for very specific cases. Your general dance child does not need this stretch at all. The problem is that they elongate some of the anatomical structures that are not meant to be stretched. So you're not supposed to stretch your ligaments or your capsules, and these long stretches do affect those elements. When those elements, your ligaments or joint capsules, are stretched, you lose stability. When you lose stability in a joint, it then takes twice as much hard work to be a good dancer. So you actually work against yourself if you are overstretching. Here again, we need to educate our dancers. They love to sit in second. They love to sit in frog. They love to do their homework with a leg up on a chair. They think that I did it. I was one of those kids. So it's educating teachers and then educating young dancers that you're actually not helping yourself. You're reversing some of your strength that you've worked so hard to gain. It's a very powerful tool, PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, but it's very dangerous for teenagers and youngsters. This type of stretch should definitely only be done by a physiotherapist or a mature dancer who has got some knowledge. There is risk of avulsion fractures, so it's hard to do it right or to teach young dancers how to do these stretches right. They are, however, very powerful tools. It's taking a muscle, you pull it to its length, and then you make that muscle contract in that position, and you fool the muscle into stretching. It's a very powerful stretching exercise, but does need to be done by a specialist. So it's very advantageous in producing long-term flexibility, but it's high risk of injury. So I've said some of these things along the way, but let's go back. When do we stretch? We stretch after our muscles are warm. Stretching is not warming up. You need to have your heart rate increased. And you can't get your heart rate increased by going from 0 into a sprint. So a good way I always make my dancers is just to walk around the room. I get them to sing, I get them to swing their arms, I then get them to skip and gallop, and gradually they get warm. They don't have to be exhausted, but they just have to have an elevated heart rate. They're then ready to start bar. And bar is your dynamic stretching, your range of motion stretching. Light sweat on the skin, you know you're good to go. In class, so in your classwork, your focus is on range of motion, and your range of motion is from your dynamic stretching, from your développé, from your port de bras, anything that's moving through positions. That's going to increase your mobility, and that's what us dancers need. We need to be able to move. We don't need to be able to stand. At the end of your bar, it's a very traditional place for stretches to occur. These can still occur, but they should not be longer than 15 seconds. So those beautiful stretches with music, you développé your leg onto the bar, you come forward and you hold, you lift your leg up into a forward shoulder, you take it over to the side, you're going over. All are still lovely to do, but we're just not holding them for as long as we used to at this point in the class. Longer stretches can be done at the end of your day. So don't do any long stretches, so 30 seconds or over. If you still have a performance or another class, leave those for when you get home and after your hot bath is a lovely place at the end of your day. Those can be done. And here again, I will say it's only for those who really need to increase their flexibility. If you're hypermobile, you should probably be going home and be doing more core exercises than more stretching exercises. When don't we stretch? So we definitely do not stretch on anything, this is anything longer than 15 seconds. If you have a performance, more class to do, rehearsal, because stretching for longer than 15 seconds, it affects your strength, your endurance, your balance, your jumping height, your reaction time, and all of those parameters for us dancers are whether we have a good or a bad performance. Especially, they've seen it, and a lot of this research is coming from the sports world, before jumping. So if I don't know about you, but I can remember before and after every allegro, doing my calf muscle stretch and sitting in that calf muscle stretch for at least a minute. No wonder I was a dreadful jumper. I probably would have been a better jumper had I known this. So those long stretches, yes, you want to stretch out your calf muscles, but again, not longer than 15 seconds. Another time we have to be very careful as dance educators is during the growth spurt years, puberty. It's hard, especially teaching girls in one class, because different students are going to have those growth spurts different years. And we are going to have to adapt what we do for each child depending where they are in their growth spurt. Again, we don't stretch tendons, ligaments, or the joint capsule. We only want to stretch the muscle and the connective tissue. We don't want to stretch those ligaments and joint capsules because we want that stability. We want our joints to have stability to make us strong dancers. So I don't know if I've got a few hypermobile dancers, and I can see when they're having their growth spurt weeks or months, I call them wibble wobbles. They have periods where they are like little wibble wobble men. So during those times, I tell them not to stretch at all, and we rather do more strengthening exercises, core exercises. They are flexible enough. They do not need to stretch. It's very, very distressful for those kids when they lose strength. It's more distressful for the tight child who suddenly becomes tighter. They lose heart. So we also, as teachers, have to watch out for those very tight kids who have worked so hard to gain a few more degrees of flexibility, and then suddenly they whip up over the summer and they're back to where they started. Assure them that muscles will be stretched again, you can regain, and it will pass. But we have to make sure that we talk to the children, and every child is going to be different at a different stage in their life. So dancers with tight body, tight bodies are built for stability. They are super lucky. They don't have some of the issues that some of the loose dancers do with stability, balance. They're stronger, faster. So help your children see the pros and cons of being a very flexible dancer as to being a tighter dancer, because there's pros and cons to each side. Your tight-bodied child is never ever going to be that circus queen with her leg over here. It just it's not a rational or it's not an idea that you should let them believe in. They're never going to get there without seriously injuring themselves and probably not having a career in dance. But if you encourage them, work with them to increase their functional range of what is the minimum requirement for ballet, and let them focus rather on their artistry, developing their musicality, they will still have a professional career. So your hypermobile dancer, less time stretching, more time on strengthening. Try and avoid comparing. So a lot of the problems that we're seeing is from those kids comparing themselves to students on Instagram, the Insta stars, on Google, on Facebook. Those are the problems that teachers of today are having to deal with. And remember, with stretches should not be painful. That's a rule of thumb, is that they shouldn't be comfortable, but they're not painful. So how long are we holding our stretches to gain flexibility or increase our flexibility? So static stretches, the ones that we hold for 30 seconds, are the ones that are going to give us extra flexibility over longer periods. So you can't, this is not a one-off wonder. You can't do it once and expect to suddenly be more flexible. So typically each stretch is repeated 4 times for 30 seconds. And you need 6 weeks to start seeing, and the results are not, it's not a massive increase. You're not going to go from not being able to do the splits to having your leg behind your ear. But you might be going from an extra 5 degrees, which is going to give that tight child more ease of movement. So for tight children, smaller gains is much safer and will stay for longer. Always stretching when warm, and avoid stretches that stretch structures that shouldn't be stretched. Recently there was, and it's a stretch that us dancers do all the time, is we stretch our hip flexor and we put one knee, I'm just going to do this, put it on here, and then we pull this here and we push forward here. There's a quite controversial article going around right now about how the head of the femur is pushing into the hip and causing labral tears during that stretch. So that one is still out for debate, but it's one that we all thought was quite safe and probably teach to all our students. So, as I said at the beginning of my lecture, a lot of research is starting to come out on stretching. It was an area that was neglected because it was hard to keep remeasuring the same parameters and getting the same results. But researchers are now attempting to go into this area of stretching because of the dreadful injuries that they're seeing, that the physiotherapists are seeing. How often to stretch? So actually, you don't need to stretch that much. You only need to stretch once a week to keep your current flexibility. So that's quite a shocker. 3 to 5 times a week to increase your range. And stretching from once per day to 3 times per day did not increase your range of motion. And additional benefits can be gained by doing 4 repetitions within one bout. So ideally, I mean, for dancers, we love to stretch. We stretch more because of the mind-body connection. So we are going to stretch every day. But we don't need to do those super long, intense stretches. We're going to stretch to make ourselves feel good, comfortable range of motion, but we don't have to be paranoid about stretching, because actually just once a week can keep your flexibility. Gender issues. In general, females are more flexible than males, in general. Male dancers, it's changed. The demands on male dancers have changed. So if I think back to watching ballet when I was in my teens, those male dancers were super, super tight. And now you see male dancers that can develop their legs as high as the woman, and it's not just 1 or 2 of them, there's many of them. So definitely the ballet world is expecting male dancers to be a little bit more flexible. But do we need our male dancers to do what women do? Is that something that should be a norm? Because it's very hard to have a male dancer who can jump as high and be as flexible. So I don't know if you've noticed in the world of ballets that females are actually not jumping so much anymore. So as the aesthetic changed for higher legs, the jumping female, that beautiful dancer who could jump, we see less and less of girls who can jump. They've all got beautiful high legs, but you see very few allegro dancers. So pushing flexibility in males, we're going to lose some of that power. Not saying that it can't be done, that you can't have both, but it's hard to balance that out. Something for us educators and teachers to think about what we want our students to be. Again, I did mention it earlier during the growth spurt, is different kids are going to have different issues at different times. So when your 10-year-old suddenly at 11 is taller than you, you know that they are going to have lost an incredible amount of flexibility as well as strength. So it's a time of care. That's a time where, as dance teachers, we shouldn't be pushing so hard. We should allow that child to go more at their own pace. We're going to have to be there comforting them because they're going to be weaker, they're going to be stiffer. So mentally they're going to be quite vulnerable. And us adults also, sadly, get stiffer as we age. So, risks of overstretching. Short term, obviously we damage the ligament and the capsule. These injuries are incredibly painful. So they tend to be chronic as well. And so that's why in that study of the hypermobile dancers going through the Royal Ballet and into the Royal Ballet Company, why so few are left in the higher ranks of the company is because when they do get injuries, they tend to be chronic. The injuries are chronic. They reoccur because every time you re-stretch, you re-injure. They're also incredibly painful, and it becomes very, very depressing for these young dancers that they can't be dancing. They can't be doing what they're loving. So that's why there is a high dropout rate. As you get older, there is a chronic wear and tear on those joints. And so having a dancer in her 30s with chronic arthritis is not uncommon. It's not something that I'd want to live with. So mental health, physical health, and early aging are all the result of overstretching. Do we need to be flexible to make it? Tricks versus artistry. What's more important? When will you use that position in ballet? I don't know if you've seen some of those scorpion positions. Do we use them in ballet? Are they pretty to watch? Has dance become more gymnastic? As a teacher, I can tell you that I get a lot of pressure from my parents. Parents want their kids to be winning at competitions. They want their kids to be more flexible. They're sending them for private lessons, for even flexibility private lessons, because their child is too tight, which in a way is good. If they're coming to somebody who will stretch them carefully, I think it's probably a good thing. But you can see that push is there. So do we need to re-educate our audiences, our students, our parents, that musicality and artistry are actually what we really enjoy about watching dance? That it's the performance that matters more than just how high your leg can go. So for me, I think stretching needs to come back to being more functional. It needs to come back to having more, that line is more important, and the line that fits on my body might not be the same as the line on somebody else's body, but it can be just as beautiful. And teaching our audiences to appreciate line and not just how high a leg is. So IADMS is a wonderful association that meets every September, October, depending on the year. People come from all around the world to present research. Lots of information for teachers can be found on the IADMS website, www.iadms.org. There is articles written for teachers on all the latest information that is coming from researchers at universities, from doctors, from physios, and put into a language that is very user-friendly. And there's lots of regional meetings that happen that are much more aimed at us dance educators and not so much at surgeons. So please do go and browse their website. If anybody would like some of the information that I put up here, I can send you the articles with pleasure. Just come and give me your email address and I can forward some of those articles to you for your reading. And I think above all, just keep an open mind in that there's not one fit for every child. And if you're a tighter child or a tighter dancer, focus on your artistry, focus on your musicality. If you're a looser child, you need to focus on your strength. So for me, that hypermobile loose dancer, and it's showing in the higher rankings of all the professional companies, they're not the ones that are making it. Does anybody have any questions?
We're always talking about stretching the muscles and making them longer, and this might not be an intelligent question, but I feel like, how can you make a muscle longer when you have two endpoints that these can't get longer?
No.
So what is exactly happening with a muscle getting longer in the same space?
I think we use a lot of imagery, and actually imagery is a good thing to bring up. So a lot of dance teachers will use that concept because we don't want, when we use a muscle actually gets shorter. But for ballet dancers, you don't want a muscle that is bulky. But when you contract a muscle, muscles have these fibers. And when you contract a muscle to create power, so if I'm lifting a leg or lifting an arm, my muscles, and it's usually the top muscle, has to contract and those fibers cross. That's how they create cross links that create power to move the limb. But that also creates bulk. So dance teachers have come up with this image of lengthening. It's not necessarily an anatomically correct thing that happens in our body, but it makes us feel longer, and we don't tend to use our abdominals in this position all the time. But we still want to use our abdominals in an isometric way. And by creating that thought of long, so we use gravity a lot. We can use that. We can push against gravity. That helps. That gives you that lengthening. And that's a lot of the time what dance teachers are talking about as well, is that if you think of anything going against gravity, you're creating a contraction that's not a concentric contraction, which is better for the look of ballet dancers. Okay, but it's not necessary. The other thing is that a lot of the times dance teachers, and I'm guilty of it as well, is that one of the ones I've got into trouble with is you say lift your leg up from the back of the leg. You actually cannot. But why are we saying that is because we don't want to create bulk and we don't want to create that heavy look. So if I say to you, lift your leg from the back and you get that beautiful swing, maybe what I should be saying is think of stretching, doing a split as you power your leg through the air, throw your leg through the air. But your hamstring, and not your hamstring, your quadriceps have to contract. They're the muscle that is working. Your hamstring has to stretch for around that one devant. So some of the imagery that dance teachers use is not anatomically correct, but we use it because we want to give. And here there's beautiful research, such exciting research on the fact that if you use images, an image is fast. So if you're thinking of an image, it goes to your muscle straight away because it's a visual thing and your body can see it, and you send that message to your muscle and you can do it. So if I'm trying to balance on my toe and I send an image of an arrow going up and down, I get it straight away. But if I say to myself anatomically, okay, I'm going to wrap my adductor around, find my big second toe, lift my abdominal over my third foot, I'm off balance before those messages have even gone through my brain to what I'm trying to do. So images are very powerful. They're not always anatomically correct. So, but there's value in them. As long as you explain, as a teacher, I'll often explain if the image is not anatomically correct. I'll explain the anatomy and then explain why the image works better. If that helps you. Yes. Okay. Any other questions? So I'm hoping there's some beautiful posters that Adams did for dance studios that have beautifully explained images about what's happening in the current literature. They should be arriving. The plane was cancelled. So as soon as they get here, we'll be putting them up at the Denison Theatre. Please go and look at them. And again, go on the IADM's website. There is a wealth of information, and it's not just information for surgeons or physios or people with a medical background. It's the information for you and me that is easily read, easily digested, and it's so exciting that we're actually starting to take from the sports world and apply it to how we train dancers. We're not just relying on knowledge that was passed down from 100 years ago, who was passed down 100 years ago. We're using current research. And I'm not saying that we should throw out the baby with the bathwater, because some of that old knowledge is so valuable. But that's the artistry. That's the musicality. So we keep that and then use the modern world of science for the anatomical stuff. So that's where sometimes imagery and anatomy are at play, because one is from passed down generation to generation, and the other is what we're learning from the world of sports and all the science that's happening. Okay. No more questions? thank you very much. Thank you for listening.